My name is Ranga, as some of you know, and today is the first day of a new class called Buddhist and Taoist Principles. As many of the other classes within meditation, there will be an aspect of this series that involves a guided meditation. But really, my vision for this class is to sort of align with a very ancient form of teaching, in which I'll be giving talks, dharma talks on particular topics, and really covering a very vast topic here, which is the philosophy from these ancient traditions of Buddhism and Taoism. But you, as a listener, you're invited to practice meditation as you listen. And what that means is, though I'll be talking about a lot, um, philosophy, practical advice, history, stories, um, you're invited to listen with your body and to listen with your heart. So it's not that you need to take notes. There won't be a pop quiz, as one of my teachers says, but really you want to listen from a place where you're looking to see what resonates with your heart, what resonates with your body. All right. So to start, find your way to a comfortable posture, one that is upright and yet relaxed, soft. And then spread your awareness throughout your whole body. So really see if you can open your heart to the way you feel in your entire physical field. And I want to start by speaking a little bit about the Buddha, who was a human being, not a god or anything like that, but a human being who lived on this earth roughly 2,600 years ago. And he was born as a prince of the Sakyan clan. So there's a kingdom in India inhabited by a people called the Sakyans, and he was their prince. And wow, it's like, what to say about this story? Well, I'll maybe give a brief overview here. So when he was born, it said that a seer um, gave a prediction, and actually there was three seers, and they predicted that this baby boy would either become a great world conqueror, a monarch whose kingdom would spread across the whole earth, or he would become a great spiritual being, an ascetic, a renunciate. And so his father, who was a king, when he heard this, he really wanted his son to become a conqueror, and he wanted his Sakyan kingdom to grow. And so it said that he did everything he could to prevent his son from becoming a renunciate, from becoming an ascetic. And so the Buddha was given, and his name before he was the Buddha, it was Prince Siddhartha. So Siddhartha was given three different palaces for the three main seasons that they would have in India, and given fine foods, fine garments. All of his needs were sort of looked after. And as the legend goes, despite this sort of bubble that he was put into, and despite this sort of coddling, in his youth, he saw what is known as the four signs. So Prince Siddhartha, one day, as he's being carried around, um, sees four signs. So he sees the first sign, which is someone who is sick. And he realizes that despite being a prince, he too is subject to illness. And then he sees someone who's old, and he realizes that he is subject to aging. And I don't know if any of you have ever gone to a hospice, um, and I've spent some time in hospices over the years, and it's actually quite striking to see that all of us, all human beings, if we live long enough, will come to a point where, or presumably will come to a point where, the energy of the body is diminished. There's many pains and aches, and it's actually just a totally different experience at that latest stage of life, right? So anyway, the Buddha sees this, and then the third sign, he sees a dead person, and it's like, wow, I too will die. And so when he sees these first three signs, it's said that the intoxication of youth and the intoxication of good health and the intoxication of life left him. So sort of this great realization of the impermanence and the changing nature of life and all these conditions that are outside of our control. All this dawned on the young prince. And then he sees the fourth sign. And this is very beautiful to me. He sees a sign of an ascetic, someone who was wearing robes, and as I recall, tattered robes, and someone who had chosen a holy life where they had stepped away from the rat race. And this is 2,500 years ago, right? But it's the same concept. Someone who had devoted their life to enlightenment, to peace and happiness and a spiritual well-being. And this is the first sort of time where this prince, whose life is adorned with luxury, where this prince comes into contact with someone who's decided to go a different path. And essentially Siddhartha, from this point, he feels this spiritual motivation well up within him, and his heart opens to the possibilities of so much more. Of these questions, I would imagine, arose for him. What is this life all about? What am I here to do? What's the meaning of life? And in a way, we might find that we can relate to this. Those of us who are interested in meditation, interested in deepening our hearts, cultivating our minds. For many of us, when we look out into the world, we can see that most people are going in one direction, but here and there are others who are going in a different way, looking for something else, for something deeper, and questioning what they should be focusing on. And I always wonder, who was this nameless, faceless ascetic that Siddhartha saw, and history doesn't even know who this person was, and it's not written down what his or her name was or anything like that. And here, this person inspired the Buddha. So beautiful. And it said that when the Buddha turned around 29 and he was married and had a son, but he had made up his mind to leave his palace. And it said that in the dead of night, he sneaks off with one of his cousins and sort of jumps the city gates and leaves his life as a prince, lets it all go. This great renunciation, and he steps out into the dark jungles of India. No possessions, no maps, no phones. And through many trials and errors and challenges, he wanders for about 6 years, searching for enlightenment, a deep happiness. And it said that then one day, as he's seated under a Bodhi tree, he breaks through and he finds what is called nibbana in the ancient language of Pali. Nibbana, Nibbana. And the Sanskrit word for this is nirvana, which many people have heard of, and it's typically translated as enlightenment or awakening. And the Buddha called it a couple different things. He called it the subtle, the deathless realm, uh, a place or state of being in which things do not arise and cease, in which birth, old age, death, decay do not occur. And really, sort of the thing that really stands out about Nibbana is that according to the Buddha's teachings, it is the end of dukkha. Dukkha is another Pali word which means suffering, stress, unsatisfactoriness. So essentially, through his spiritual path, the Buddha breaks through to the end of suffering. Nibbana is also called cooling. It's also translated as cooling. And you can think of it as a cooling of the fires of all the things that harass and plague the mind. A sense of lacking that I need something more. Aversion, anger, hatred, judgment, criticizing, fear, anxiety, depression, sorrow, dullness, laziness, apathy, restlessness, compulsion, agitation, doubt, uncertainty, all the things that plague the mind. What the Buddha discovered is that these things are fabricated, concocted, that somehow we participate in our own suffering, that we create it unknowingly, and that it's possible for us to transcend, to go beyond the ocean of suffering. Now, how does that sound? as I have gone through my journey teaching, I know that many people, when they hear about enlightenment, there's a sense of, oh, that's, I don't know what that is, or maybe it's real, maybe it's not. Do I believe in it? Or uh, oh, that's not what I'm looking for. Like, I'm just looking for some stress relief. Like, I just want to find a way to feel a little bit less anxiety. But that desire to be well, to be at ease, to be safe and secure, whether we realize it or not, in one way, that desire is actually an aspiration for nibbana. We want to be safe. We want to be at ease and at peace. And we think that we find that ease and peacefulness by getting what we want. This is the sort of typical idea here in life, right? If you just get what you want, you'll be happy. And it's when I get what I want that I'm happy, and when I don't get what I want, I feel unhappy. So it's pretty simple. I just need to work hard and figure things out and get more of what I want. But nibbana is an enlightenment, what the Buddha broke through to. It's something that is beyond all duality, beyond good and bad. It's actually beyond happiness and suffering, pleasure and pain, gain and loss. It's called the unconditioned, the unborn, the uncreated. That's another way of saying we actually can't create enlightenment. It's not caused by anything. In the Buddhist teachings, it said that whatever arises can fall away, because whatever arises due to certain conditions, and those conditions can end. It's like, if we become happy because we've made money, right? The underlying conditions of having money can end. And so we can lose a happiness that's dependent on money. And I'm not saying that money should not be pursued. I'm simply stating that the sort of ultimate goal, if we really want to be well, is a peace that is not dependent on conditions that can end. And furthermore, according to the teachings of the Buddha, this sort of safety, when he says it's unborn, unconditioned, uncreated, that's another way of saying it's already here. It's innate in us. It's not foreign. It's not something that we can build up to. It's not something that we can create. That somehow it's something that we awaken to, that we realize. And so a key point I want to make here is what is the Buddha? And if we're interested in Buddhist principles, what is the Buddha? And this word Buddha, it's most often translated as awakened one. So there's a lot to say about this. Sort of Buddhology is a great topic, but just to kind of simply say, uh, the Buddha was a human being who awakened to the way things are, who saw deeply into the truths of our lives, of our world, and of our minds. So the Buddhist path is about learning to understand your own mind. There's a monk named Tanisaru Bhikkhu who says, uh, isn't it ironic that as human beings, we have a great capacity to understand things, but we don't understand our own minds? Isn't it ironic? So this practice that the Buddha then taught is one of looking inwards. It's one of inquiry, mindfulness, learning to be present with the way things are. And it's a practice of letting go of the things that cause stress, learning to put aside, let go of what does not belong, of what's not really true, of what's not helpful. So it's an extremely practical path. It's not one that requires anyone to be a Buddhist or to subscribe to any religion. Uh, it's it's one that invites us to come and see. So ehipassiko is an ancient word for a quality of the Dhamma or the Dharma, as you may have heard it. Dhamma is the Pali word, Dharma is a Sanskrit word, and it can mean truths, but in this case, it means the teachings of the Buddha. So the teachings of the Buddha invite us to ehipassiko, to come and see for ourselves the nature of our own minds. So, there he was under the Bodhi tree, awakened, and he saw something so deep, so subtle, that it completely shifted his sense of things, his sense of reality. And he found that all suffering is unnecessary, pointless. And it's said that he found that our lives are like dreams, that somehow we're under illusion. We're under the spell of an illusion, as if we're in a dream, but we think that it's real. And it said that he had a thought of like, oh wow, this is so deep. How could anyone else ever understand this? He was so aware of how deeply entrenched our tendencies and views are. And for a moment, it said that he thought to himself that this is not something that can be taught, because he was aware of how difficult it was for him to get to that point. And as the story goes, a great god, this sort of energetic force in the world named Brahma Sahampati, saw this. He saw the Buddha's mind turning away from teaching and lamented this. And so he appeared to the Buddha and said, no, use your eye. Use the sight that you have gained from your enlightenment to look at the world. And you will find that there are some who can heed this call, who can understand what you found. And so it said that the Buddha looks and he surveys the world, and he sees that there are some with little dust in their eyes, some who can see. And he decides to teach out of compassion for living beings. Not because he wanted a great following or anything like that. All selfish motivation is evaporated in nibbana, in enlightenment. But with his ocean-like compassion, he saw that there are some in this world who can understand what he understood. And so there's a famous line, one of my favorite lines that he says. He said, "Open are the doors to the deathless." So here the deathless is referring to nibbana, this unending peace. Open are the doors to the deathless. To those who will listen, let them show their conviction. So here I sort of just briefly talked a little bit about the historical legend of the Buddha's life, and there's a whole lot more to it. And why might this be important for you? If you're a meditator and you simply look at your practice as, I don't want to feel so stressed, so for a few minutes when I can, I look to unwind. That's all well and good, and that's actually really great. You're doing a lot better than most, and for a lot of us, that's how we start. But see what happens to your own life, your own meditation practice, if you consider that you are stepping into an ancient lineage, that there's been this great river through thousands of years of living beings who, just like you, were interested in training their minds, interested in developing great qualities like mindfulness and compassion, wisdom. Beings who wondered, how do I meditate? How do I do this? What's the right way to practice? And I wonder if you can feel that as you sit here, having just heard part of the legend of the Buddha's life. If you can feel your connection with these other seekers, they're sometimes called truth seekers. Can you feel that you're not alone? That others have been where you stand today? As some of the Buddhist texts say, "O nobly born, you of noble origin, the sons and the daughters of the Buddhas, of the awakened ones. Remember who you are. Remember who you really are. Come home." And I'll end with something that Milarepa said, a yogi from the Tibetan tradition. He said, "The affairs of the world will go on forever. Do not delay meditation." So thank you for listening. And I hope you all continue to join this class as we dive into the deep well of these ancient traditions.